I was looking through dive gear categories on scuba.com thinking about what I could talk about this week, and I stopped on gauges. Everyone focuses on like the regulator itself and how to choose the right regulator for you, myself included, but not many divers focus on just the gauges themselves, and that's what I'm going to do today. Hi all of you awesome scuba divers out there, welcome to the Scuba Diver Magazine channel, your favourite place for the latest scuba diving news and gear reviews. Your gauges on your regulators is important. And there are a few quirks and sort of like terminology when it comes to gauges that if you've never bought gauges before, you may not be aware of. So to help you out, I figured that I'd break down the basics and a few things that if you come across them in the wild, you'll be just better informed. First, I do need to mention scuba.com and their huge range of dive gear to find exactly what you need. They stock everything from masks and snorkels to compressors and ROVs, and their team of divers are there to help you find the right gear for your underwater needs. You can book dive holidays through scuba.com as well. You can even join their dive clubs on the east and west coast of the US. They sell you dive equipment, they can service dive equipment, and they'll even buy your dive gear after you're done with it, which is pretty cool. Whatever you're looking for, it's definitely worth heading over to scuba.com to see what services they can provide. There are three common there are just three common gauges out there: a submersible pressure gauge, or SPG for short, because submersible pressure gauge is quite a mouthful, a depth gauge, that of course indicates your current depth, and a compass that points north or to the nearest chunk of metal or electrical current. You can find some thermometers out there. They're usually built into depth gauges or just your dive computer, but those are the main three. Every gauge system, if you buy like a stack of gauges, they'll have a SPG. It's what the hose attaches to, so every single gauge console will have a submersible pressure gauge on it regardless. So the SPG will be the gauge at the base, and there are two common styles of SPG. We have a compact SPG and what is affectionately dubbed a brass and glass SPG. Compact gauges, as the name suggests, are a bit slimmer, but they do tend to be a bit more fragile. The front clear section is usually made from plastic, and with enough effort that can pop off. It's not going to just fall off if you tap it. You do have to put some force behind it or really try and open it up, but I've had that before where the top just kind of pops off. It's not unusual for these to rattle. There's a metal tube inside called a board-on tube, and it's kind of free floating to a certain degree. So if you do pick one up and hear a rattle, that's normal. There's obviously a certain amount of normality to that. If it rattles a lot, like something's fallen out, then yeah, I'd be raising some red flags on that piece of dive equipment. But yeah, if there's a little light, then yeah, that's perfectly normal. Brass and glass gauges are a bit more chunky, but they're tough. Tempered glass on the front and a just general stronger design add a little bit of extra weight. We're talking grams here, but they just last forever if you look after them. You can get different sizes. Larger sizes are rare, but they do exist. So if you struggle to read gauges and need something a little bit larger, there do exist some larger screen SPGs out there. Most will have a either white or off-white face to them, which glows in the dark. If you shine your torch on it or leave it out in the sun, it's going to glow in the dark for a certain amount of time. But you can find some today with a black face. You can find coloured faces as well. We see quite a few yellows because it contrasts quite nicely underwater. Black faces help to prevent glare in dark places when you shine your light on them to charge up, because instead of the face glowing in the dark, it's the hand and the little dials that actually light up in the dark. But if you're in a shipwreck and you've already adjusted to the darkness, if you shine your torch on a white face, it's gonna glare back at you, whereas if you do it on a black face, It's still going to reflect off the glass and whatnot, so I wouldn't recommend looking at it whilst you shine your torch on it, but it's just going to reflect less, and it is still just as easy to see both in daylight and in low light conditions. Metric or imperial, depending on where you are in the world. One will be more common. You'll usually be able to get hold of the alternative, but it might be like a special order. Here in the UK, for example, if you order an SPG, it's going to be in bar. But if you're imperial inclined, your dive center should be able to get hold of an imperial gauge. Just don't get grumpy at them that they don't have one then and there in stock, or if it takes a little while for it to get in, because even the manufacturer, the international distributor in your country, might not hold that many of the alternate in stock because demand is relatively low. The gauges, or the SPG, is usually linear, which means that each measurement, like each bar or each PSI, is the same size all the way around the face of the gauge. Once we get into depth gauges, you'll see some non-linear gauges and why we have them, but yeah, SPGs just tend to be linear. The most that you may see on SPG, because they try to keep it as clean and clear faced as possible, is a bit of color coding. The last 50 bar is usually red, to let you know that you're in your reserve, basically. Imperial gauges, it's anywhere between 500 and 1000 PSI, depending on the gauge design. There doesn't seem to be like a standard, at this, it always turns red. You should really consider switching to metric anyway. It makes working things out so much easier. But yeah, sometimes you'll see over a certain pressure, it has like one color, below a certain pressure, another color, but below 50 bar, it's usually red. Depth gauges are also metric or imperial. The gauge may be linear or non-linear. You'll notice that on some gauges that the shallower the depth is, the greater the distance is on the gauge. This is ideal for like safety stops at the end of the dive at shallower waters. Any change of depth in shallow waters is going to have a larger needle swing, and you can then see whether you're ascending or descending on that gauge more precisely. At deeper waters, it's less of an issue, so the readings are much closer together, but in shallower waters, you've got much more room to see whether you're at 3, 4, or 5 meters. You'll have a pair of needles on a depth gauge on the face of it, one that moves as you descend and ascend. The other is moved by that needle and then stays in place to mark your maximum depth. There's a small pin that kind of sticks down, and as the actual depth needle turns, it pushes on that pin, but when it moves back, the maximum depth needle just stays in place. It's an elegant design, like just gets the job done, and then it just stays there so you can log your maximum depth on that particular dive, and then you just reset it before your next dive. The center of the gauge often has like a flathead screw or like a grippy kind of detailing that you can put your thumb on it, and you can just turn it to reset that depth needle back down to either like 0 or like 3 meters or something. Otherwise, it's just going to stay pointing at your maximum depth regardless. It's analog. On some depth gauges, you may find another dial, usually on the back or one side, that you can zero the depth of the gauge for accuracy. It's purely that sometimes they do get knocked around, or you do need to adjust them a little bit, and yeah, it basically just rotates the face a little bit so that wherever your needle is, when you're just at sea level, you can rotate it so that the face is now, or the needle is now pointing at 0. Your compass is often set at a slight angle so that you can hold the gauge at a comfortable like 45 degrees in front of you. If you've got like a triple gauge kind of setup, you'll have the triple gauges all flat, and then also the first 2 gauges flat, and then the compass will be angled at about another 45 degrees. It's basically there so that, yeah, you can see your depth, your pressure, and you can read the compass, and the compass is horizontal, because if it's angled, it's not going to turn freely. They're designed so that you can read them from the top and the side as well. Dive compasses don't have a simple, just a barred needle like most like land compasses. They tend to have a dome-shaped card that sits on a needle. On top of that card or dome, whatever shape it is, you'll have a needle that points north, but around the edges you'll have bearings. The bearings, unfortunately, when you're looking from the top down, will be reversed. That's because when you're looking through the side window instead of from the top, you can see what bearing you're facing at that given time. A lot of people will come in and they say, oh hey, but all the numbers are backwards. I'm facing north, but it's saying that I'm heading at 180 degrees. And it's like, no, when you look at the side of the compass, the side of the card that's facing you has a 0, so you are facing north. The whole module is going to be filled with oil of some kind to prevent the pressure from affecting it, and you might find a little bubble. Bubbles aren't the end of the world unless they're quite large or they start to increase in size or number. In that case, you probably have a leak. A teeny tiny bubble should be fine. It's just an unfortunate side effect of the manufacturing process, but keep an eye on it to see if it does get larger over time. If bubbles get to a certain size, the surface tension can stop that card from turning, so it's important to keep an eye on it and return it to the manufacturer if it's still under warranty. Another problem that you can find is sometimes the card can fall off the pin. It's rare, but it can happen, especially if the gauge is dropped or like shaken for whatever reason. If the card has fallen off of the pin, there's not a lot that you can do, especially because it's oil filled. You can't really open it up. They're usually factory sealed. You just kind of have to replace that module, or sometimes it's called a puck because it's kind of ice hockey puck shaped. All gauges for that case are modular, and you can change individual gauges without affecting the other gauges. So if you have a triple gauge and like the compass on the end breaks, you don't have to replace the entire thing. You can just replace that individual module. The same for depth gauges and even submersible pressure gauges. Depending on the design of the actual boot, the thing that it sits in, I'll talk about this all a little bit later, but you can replace just that individual component. But back to compasses. Around the top, you'll find a bezel that rotates, and with like a two-way ratchet system. It goes in both directions, but it kind of holds it in one position. That's just to help you lock in a bearing to follow, and that way you can put the gauges down. If you pick it back up, the bezel's still in the same position, and you can just reorient yourself. The actual like bezel and the cradle that it sits on, they can slip from time to time. There's usually a separate cradle that wraps around the compass module, and then they both sit inside of the boot. Sometimes they do need a twist to get them lined up again. It'll be fairly obvious once you do pull it apart to see which way it goes around, but yeah, occasionally they do slip and do need a little bit of tidying up. So when you're buying gauges to fit your regulator, you'll probably come across consoles with either like single, twin or triple gauges set into them. They'll often be named for the number of gauges, so expect to see double gauges and triple gauges set into what's commonly known as a boot. Every console will start with a submersible pressure gauge or an SPG, as I said. The boot that gauges sit into is usually made from a tough rubber that the gauges just push into. You can soften them up by warming them in warm water for a bit. I've seen a lot of people struggle because once they cool down, they're quite stiff. So trying to struggle to pop one of the modules or pucks out. But if you just soak the entire thing in some warm water, probably not boiling water, probably wouldn't go that serious. But yeah, definitely hot water, as hot as you can get it out from a tap. Just leave it in there. That softens up the rubber and it's much more pliable. After the submersible pressure gauge, as far as like what comes next, it's honestly a free-for-all. Your depth gauge is usually the next one, or it can also be on the back or you may not even have a depth gauge. It is really up to you. Some people just have a submersible pressure gauge, flip it over and it's a compass. In some cases you can fit a dive computer in the place of the depth gauge. That's why a lot of dive computers are like sized like hockey pucks, so that they can actually fit in place of an analog depth gauge, or if you want to, you can just fit some wrist straps and then strap it to your wrist as a normal dive computer. It's up to you. The boot itself, of course, is really there for protection and just mounting points, really. The rubber or plastic can help protect the gauges from bumps and scrapes, and they usually have some kind of loop or loops around them so that you can clip the gauges to a D-ring and just hold it in place. Some can be modular, so you can add and change and remove them as you prefer, or you don't, if you're just running a submersible pressure gauge, you don't even need a boot. It really is just there for protection and an added mounting point. It is really up to you. The hose fitting itself is one of the few universal things that we have in the dive industry. It's the same hose thread on every single regulator and every submersible pressure gauge. Just like any other hose, if you're fitting it to your regulator for the first time, find the correct port on your first stage. Some have one, but most have two high pressure ports. Remove the port plug with an Allen key. The actual port plug itself, it's usually the larger of the two. You get low pressure and high pressure. If it's gauges, it has to go in the larger one, and they often have HP or something stamped next to them, so they're quite easy to identify. So remove that port plug. Double check that there's an O-ring on the male hose fitting. If there isn't, it gets very noisy, but if there isn't, you can just take the one from your port plug if you're in a pinch. Screw it in, just hand tight, but when you're doing it, be aware of what's going on the other end, because your gauges are going to be spinning and you don't want them to bash into anything hard. So whilst you're focusing on screwing it into the first stage, just be aware of what's happening at the end or the other end of the hose. Do it up and just like finger tight, and then with a spanner or a wrench, whatever you call it, nip it up just beyond finger tight. You want it just tight enough that you cannot unscrew it by hand, but not so tight that you're damaging the threads, because it's brass in most cases, so you can damage it quite easily. So just a little nip up, that's all you really need. The other end is a bit more interesting. If your gauges have a boot, then the first thing is to always thread it through the boot first. Otherwise, it's going to be much harder to try and fit the entire gauge through that teeny tiny little hole. Realistically, you're just going to have to undo and then redo all of your work. But yeah, put it through the boot first, because then you're going to pull it back through. When you're marrying it up with the submersible pressure gauge, check for a swivel pin. There should be a small metal bar with a pair of tiny O-rings on either side that sits inside between the hose and the submersible pressure gauge. Sometimes it gets stuck in one or the other, but again, it gets noisy without one. And if you're replacing a broken hose, for example, then if it's stuck in the hose and you just bin that, you've binned your submersible, not your submersible pressure gauge, your swivel pin. So just double check on that before you throw anything away. The swivel pin just pops in place and you screw the gauge in. Again, just finger tight, and then with a pair of spanners, just nip it up. So again, you can't undo it with your fingers. The rest really depends on the gauges themselves and the overall design. They're not all the same size or shape, so replacing broken gauges can sometimes be tricky. So remember to measure twice before you order a replacement. That isn't like for like. If it's like for like, you should be okay. Sometimes they do like progress. You have like last year's design and then next year's design. A lot of cases, the manufacturers try to make their lives a little bit easier and make it the same dimensions. They just change the design. But between manufacturers, be a little bit careful. You don't always need to mount your gauges to the submersible pressure gauge and the hose. You can find wrist mounts. You can also find retractors as well. Wrist mounts can be nice because it's very natural to kind of check your gauges on your wrist, but they can be quite clunky. And if you have your compass on your wrist, like next to your dive computer, then like the electronics or the metal from your dive computer may sway your compass because of the metal of the electrics being so close. So do be aware. It's the same for like having it anywhere near any of your dive equipment or even a shipwreck. Compasses don't know the difference between pointing north and pointing towards anything that's magnetic. So just be aware of what's on your body, because it might just have you swimming around and around in circles because it's always pointing towards your dive computer, for example. Retractor mounts are quite nice, but you do become a bit of a Christmas tree with things like dangling off of you. It is convenient to like find the D-ring, find the gauges, and then pull it out to be able to check them, let go, and they just zip back into place. But in my experience, they falter eventually. Lots of moving parts and metal springs in seawater. There's too many for my likings, and whatever you do, don't try and open them up when they fail yourself. It just, something goes ping and you will never get it all back into that body. So I'm not a huge fan of them myself. Hose mounts also exist. They're like a semi-permanent fixing that you usually remove a certain section, wrap it around a hose, and then screw it in place, and you attach it to a hose at a certain point along whatever hose you want, really. Just be aware that not all hoses are the same diameter, especially high pressure braided hoses. They're teeny tiny, so it's just gonna slide around on that hose and be really annoying. There are a few other like oddities when it comes to gauges. Button gauges are the first. They're very small gauges that screw into the first stage directly. They're not particularly accurate. They're only made to be like check gauges to see roughly how much gas is in the cylinder. It's basically for divers who want a real minimal, you don't even want like a high pressure hose coming off of it. You just want a teeny tiny little gauge on it so that when you pressurize it, you can see whether it's in the green or in the red, basically, whether the cylinder needs filling or not. Digital gauges are extremely rare, but they do exist. They're nice because they often combine like pressure and depth gauges with a specific readout. It's kind of like a dive computer, but without the algorithm stuff. So they're a lot cheaper, and they'll specifically say you're at this particular depth, you have this much gas left in your cylinder. Some will even tell you other things like your maximum depth, your average depth, that kind of stuff. Depends on the precise design. But yeah, they exist. They're just something a little bit different. A good set of gauges is a must, and it will do more than just tell you how much gas is left in your tank. They can even detect for leaks in your regulator. I'll pop a link up here to the video to show you how. Personally, I run a brass and glass SPG with a bolt snap tied to the hose, and that's it. No boot or anything. It's secure, just with a bolt snap and some cave line. If I ever need to, I can cut it free just with a knife. I then have a compass bungeed to the back of one of my hands. It's still out of the way. I can still use the hand for whatever I need to, and then you can quickly glance at it at whatever direction I'm heading. And sometimes I'll just use like my dive computer's digital compass if I don't want the extra hassle, because even like a compass can stick out a good inch or so, so it can be quite clunky when you're like putting on your BCD. I don't personally bring a depth gauge with me on every dive because I've got my dive computer. If my computer floods, I can send up a buoy and use the line as a reference for how quickly I'm ascending if I need to. That way I can monitor my ascent rate, and yeah, I can just still do a safety stop. The only complication is that you then have to do a bit of timing to work out how long it is, or just stay there as long as you can until your gas runs down to 50 bar. The brand of your gauges does not need to match the brand of your regulator. It's not going to affect the warranty or anything. Just choose the gauges that you prefer, basically. Easier, either because the faces are easier to read, or the design of the boot or whatever just suits your needs better. Don't think that, oh, I have this particular brand regulator, I must buy the same brand gauges. doesn't work like that. It's a universal fitting. You can fit whatever gauges you like. Remember, if you are in the market for a new set of gauges, or anything else for that matter, head over to scuba.com and they'll take care of you. If you can't find what you're looking for, you can chat with one of their team. They're very easy to chat to and they do know their stuff. Head over to scuba.com and have a look around their website. If you do have any questions for me, then by all means pop them down in the comment section. I can take a little while to get back. It's not going to be a back and forwards chat, but the community watching this does answer questions when they see them, so thank you everybody for helping me out and helping other divers, and you're always welcome on our website scubadivemag.com, where you can check out our latest articles and magazine subscriptions as well, and of course you can subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. Thank you for watching everybody, and of course, safe diving.